Peter Pan in Kensington Garden by J. M. Barrie. A new edition. London, Hodder and Stoughton, 1906. To Sylvia and Arthur Llewellyn Davies and their boys, my boy, Kensington Gardens. In the Broad Walk, you meet all the people worth knowing. 1. The Grand Tour of the Gardens. You must see for yourself that it will be difficult to follow Peter Pan's adventures unless you are familiar with the Kensington Gardens. They are in London, where the king lives, and I used to take David there nearly every day, unless he was looking decidedly flushed. No child has ever been in the whole of the gardens, because it is so soon time to turn back. The reason it is soon time to turn back is that, if you are as small as David, you sleep from 12 to 1. If your mother was not so sure that you slept from 12 to 1, you could most likely see the whole of them. The gardens are bounded on one side by a never-ending line of omnibuses, over which your nurse has such authority that if she holds up her finger to any one of them, it stops immediately. She then crosses with you in safety to the other side. There are more gates to the garden than one, but that is the one you go in at, and before you go in, you speak to the lady with the balloons, who sits just outside. This is as near to being inside as she may venture, because if she were to let go of her hold of the railings for one moment, the balloons would lift her up, and she would be flown away. She sits very squat, for the balloons are always tugging at her, and the strain has given her quite a red face. Once she was a new one, because the old one had to let go. And David was very sorry for the old one. But as she did let go, he wished he had been there to see it. The Hump, which is the part of the Broad Walk where all the big races are run. The gardens are a tremendous big place, with millions and hundreds of trees. And first you come to the figs, but you scorn to loiter there, for the figs is the resort of the superior little persons, who are forbidden to mix with the commonality, and it is so named, according to legend, because they dress in full fig. They are dainty ones and themselves contemptuously called figs by David and other heroes, and you have a key to the manners and customs of this dandical section of the gardens when I tell you that cricket is called crickets there. Occasionally, a rebel fig climbs over the fence into the world, and such a one was Miss Mabel Grey, of whom I shall tell you when we come to Miss Mabel Grey's gate. She was the only really celebrated fig. We are now in the Broad Walk, and it is as much bigger than other walks as your father is bigger than you. David wondered if it began little, and grew, until it was quite grown up, and whether the other walks are its babies. And he drew a picture, which diverted him very much, of the Broad Walk giving a tiny walk and airing in a perambulator. In the Broad Walk, you meet all the people who are worth knowing, and there's usually a grown-up with them to prevent them going on the damp grass, and to make them stand disgraced at the corner of the seat, if they have been Mad Dog or Mary Annish. To be Mary Annish is to behave like a girl, whimpering because nurse won't carry you, or simpering with your thumb in your mouth, and it is a hateful quality. But to be a mad dog is to kick out at everything, and there is some satisfaction in that. If I were to point out all the notable places as we pass up the Broad Walk, it would be time to turn back before we reach them, and I simply wave my stick at Checo Hewlett's tree, that memorable spot where a boy called Checo lost his penny, and, looking for it, found 2 pence. There has been a good deal of excavation going on there ever since. Farther up the walk is the little wooden house in which Marmaduke Perry hid. There is no more awful story of the gardens than this of Marmaduke Perry, who had been Mary Annish 3 days in succession, and was sentenced to appear in the Broad Walk dressed in his sister's clothes. He hid in the little wooden house and refused to emerge until they brought him knickerbockers with pockets. You now try to go to the Round Pond, but nurses hate it, because they are not really manly, and they make you look the other way at the big penny in the baby's palace. She was the most celebrated baby of the gardens and lived in the palace all alone, with ever so many dolls. So people rang the bell, and out she got out of her bed, though it was past 6 o'clock, and she lighted a candle and opened the door in her nightie. And then they all cried with great rejoicings, "Hail, Queen of England!" What puzzled David most was how she knew where the matches were kept. The big penny is a statue about her. Next, we come to the hump, which is part of the broad walk where all big races are run. And even though you had no intention of running, you do run when you come up to the hump. It is such a fascinating slide down kind of place. Often you stop when you have run about halfway down it, and then you are lost. But there is another little wooden house near here, called the Waffle House. So you tell the man that you are just lost, and he finds you. It is glorious fun racing down the hump, but you can't do it on windy days, because then you are not there, but the fallen leaves do it instead of you. There is almost nothing that has such a keen sense of fun as a fallen leaf. From the hump, we can see that the gate is called after Miss Mabel Grey, the fig I promised to tell you about. There are always 2 nurses with her, or else one mother and one nurse, and for a long time she was a pattern child who always coughed off the table and said, "How do you do?" to the other figs. And the only game she played at was flinging a ball gracefully and letting the nurse bring it back to her. Then one day she tired of it all and went mad dog. And first, to show that she was really mad dog, she loosened both her bootlaces and put out her tongue east, west, north, and south. Then she flung her sash into a puddle and danced on it till dirty water was squirted all over her frock. After which, she climbed the fence and had a series of incredible adventures, one of the least of which was that she kicked off both her boots. At last, she came to the gate that is now called after her, out of which she ran into streets David and I had never been in, though we have heard them roaring, and still she ran on and would never again have been heard of had not her mother jumped into a bus and overtaken her. It all happened, I should say, long ago, and this is not the Mabel Grey who David knows. Returning up the broad walk, we have on our right the baby walk, which is so full of perambulators that you could cross from one side to the other, stepping on babies, but the nurses won't let you do it. From this walk, a passage called Bunting's Thumb, because it is that length, leads into Picnic Street, where there are real kettles and chestnut blossoms fall into your mug as you are drinking. Quite common children picnic here also, and the blossoms fall into their mugs just the same. Next comes St. Governor's Well, which was full of water when Malcolm and the Bold fell into it. He was his mother's favorite, and he let her put her arm around his neck in public because she was a widow. But he was also partial to adventures, and liked to play with the chimney sweep, who had killed a good many bears. The sweep's name was Sooty, and one day, when they were playing near the well, Malcolm fell in and would have been drowned had not Sooty dived in and rescued him, and the water had washed Sooty clean, and he now stood revealed as Malcolm's long-lost father. So, Malcolm would not let his mother put her arm around his neck anymore. Between the well and the round pond are the cricket pitches, and frequently the choosing of sides exhausts so much time that there is scarcely any cricket. Everybody wants to bat first, and as soon as he is out, he bowls unless you are the better wrestler. And while you are wrestling with him, the fielders have scattered to play at something else.